morning. We have another pre-recorded math lesson for today because I'm going to be, I'm gone today on Monday when you're watching this, but I'll be back for a normal class on Tuesday, so we'll have regular classes. I know you're excited to see everybody. So today we're starting a new math unit on bar models, which we've already been incorporating into the addition and subtraction we've been doing so far, but this is just focused completely on bar models for this unit. So as usual, we are going to have notes to take. So please take out your math notebook. And we're going to take some notes over the two kinds of bar models that we'll be doing in general. Even when we get to multiplication and division, it's always going to go back to these main two bar models. Okay. So you don't have to write a header yet. I wanted to first look at some pictures of the two types of bar models that we have. And to represent one of them, here is a little cartoon to introduce the whole unit. We've got two students here who are playing a computer game, and one of them says, I scored 2,715 points. What's your score, Raul? Make a guess. I scored 310 points more than you. More than. So his is 310 more than this number. So she's thinking through, making a mental picture of how much that is using what's called a comparison bar model. And she says 3,025 is a good score. So she added those two together, and the comparison bar model is a good picture of what's happening there. Okay, so we are going to look at two types of bar models. One of them is called a PartWhole bar model. Now, in years past, if you've been at the school in second and first grade, you might have heard of this as part-whole bar model, okay? Because there are two parts. So with addition and subtraction, we will have, always two parts, and then there's one whole. And if we know both of the parts, we add those two together to find the whole. If we, like in this one here, know one of the parts, and we also know the whole, then we subtract to find what's missing here. So in this example, there's some football cards, some baseball cards, and football and baseball cards together. If we already know how many football cards there are and we know the total, can the 24 from our total to find how many baseball cards there are. Okay, so both of those are called part-whole bar models. There is one rectangle and two parts. The other type of bar model that we're going to look at is called a comparison bar model. Okay, say comparison. So comparison means we've got two or more things that we're comparing. A lot of times you can tell that we're going to use a comparison bar model if there were words like in our little cartoon, someone scored more points than another. So we've got two different people and we are comparing one having more than the other. In this little story problem, it says that Grant buys 345 fruit bars. Ken buys 230 more fruit bars than Grant. How many fruit bars does Ken buy? So we know how many Grant buys. We also know how many more Ken buys. And we do a little bracket here to show how many Ken buys. That's making up the difference. You know how we've talked about difference being the answer to a subtraction problem? Well, this difference here is making up what is the difference between this smaller unit of how many Grant buys and the larger unit of how many Ken buys. So to find this whole amount of how many Ken buys, we can add the two smaller amounts. Okay. Now, this might seem like a lot for those of you who have not done this before, and maybe even for some of you who have done this in previous years, you still get confused about whether to use part-whole or comparison. we're going to take a look at quite a few examples together, and also we're going to spend lots of time going through keywords to help you tell which kind of bar model to choose in a given story problem. Okay, at this time, let's do our header with your name. The date as you're watching this is October 19th, 2020. This is Math, Chapter 5, Introduction. So I'm just going to put Chapter 5, since this is just an introduction. We are going to go through some of the bar models that actually were just from those pictures I showed, and walk through the steps in creating bar models. It will look a little different than the way the book does it, but very, very slightly. Okay. First, let's take a look at this bar model here, beginning by just reading the story problem and making a mental picture of what's happening, just like we do for well-ordered language and with our dictated sentences. It's important to really think through what's happening and not just look for the numbers, because if you simply look for the numbers, there is a low chance that you'll get the right answer, because you might just jump to thinking we've got to add or we need to subtract when you don't truly understand what's happening in the story. So this gets especially harder when we start multiplication and division. So really picture what's happening here. Mrs. Jones buys a cake for $15 and she has $42 left. Can you picture that? Okay. I think it's helpful to put yourself in the shoes of whoever the person is in the story problem. So think that you're buying a cake that it costs $15 and you still have $42 left. You still have that much money. Now, how much money did Mrs. Jones or you have at first? So to represent this information, we can do this part-whole bar model to show how much money the cake cost and then how much money Mrs. Jones still has. Now, what the book doesn't walk you through is creating that answer sentence, and we want to do that first. So every time we create bar models, our first step is to create an answer sentence, because that's going to help us figure out what we're trying to solve. So for the answer sentence, and actually let's put a label on this since these are our notes, it can be helpful to make it very clear what's happening. Okay, so for the answer sentence, we'll say, oops, Mrs. Jones had, since that's how much she had at the beginning, blank dollars at first. Okay, so we start with that answer sentence. And I like to put that answer sentence at the top because it's our very first step. Fill it in with the right answer, and this helps us to see what we are trying to solve. Okay, now we are going to create a part-whole bar model. And I want you to label that. Put a box around it. Now, a part-whole bar model is when there is one rectangle into two parts. This is an example of that. Now, reviewing our information again, and it's going to look very similar to this, but not exactly. Mrs. Jones buys a cake for $15 and she still has $42 left. I like to use about 2 lines for PartWhole bar models, but if it's comparison, which means there's 2 rectangles, I like to have each of them taking up about 1 line. You don't have to do it identical to that, but I do want you to make sure your work is very neat and tidy. You could even use a ruler if you'd like to. Okay. Now, the book doesn't have you do this, but for our school, I want you to always, and this should be the case for your other grades as well, always put the whole amount on the top. And we don't know the whole amount, so we're going to put a question mark there. The whole amount is how much she had at first. Now, we do know she had $15 that she spent on a cake. So she went to the store with a certain amount of money. She bought a cake, but then she still has some money left. $42. Something that can be really helpful is to put a label in the middle of your bar model. You do not always have to do this, but feel free to put labels in the middle of the bar model to help you. In comparison bar models, our labels go on the side, but with PartWhole, there's not a specific place, but you can just put them in the middle. And that should be fine with your teachers in 4th and 5th grade too. So question mark for the whole amount goes on the top. These are the 2 parts. Now, whenever we have a PartWhole bar model like this with 1 rectangle, and we know the 2 parts and we're looking for a whole, we add. So 15 plus 42. Doesn't matter which one goes on top. Now, 5 plus 2 equals 7. 1 plus 4 equals 5. What is the total amount? $57. We're going to write it in 2 more spots. So we wrote it here in our calculation. We're also going to add it here so that once we're done, we have a complete bar model. This is all of, and last step, we're going to add it to our answer sentence with that line there. You should have that line there until you have an answer. Okay, that's called a PartWhole bar model. Feel free to highlight that as well. Answer sentence would be a good thing to highlight as well, because those are some terms that we're going to use pretty frequently in this bar model unit. Okay, so this is an example of a PartWhole bar model. I'd like to also do an example of one more PartWhole bar model where you have to subtract because you know the whole and you know one part, but you don't know the other part. This is the same one we just talked about where Ben, we've got Ben in class, and he likes to collect cards too. Ben, I hope that this is kind of fun for you. Now, Ben has 60 baseball and football cards in all. He has 24 football cards. How many baseball cards does he have? I know our Ben likes to collect Pokemon cards, so you could imagine Pokemon cards instead. Maybe some are baseball cards, others are Pokemon cards. Now, we know the total. We know 60 baseball and football cards. We also know one part, but we're looking for another part. Whenever that happens, that we're looking for just one part, that is going to be a type of problem where we subtract, not add. So let's write this on our own paper. Now, our answer sentence, we still are going to write. Actually, and we don't need to write actually answer sentence, but Ben has blank baseball cards. Okay, and then for the bar model, we know the total number of cards. The total number was 60. And I am going to do that a little different than the book does because our total should always go on the top, or the whole. And then 24 was the number of football cards. And we don't know the baseball cards. I'm going to put a question mark there. So for this one, we would subtract 6, which equals 36. You could put an F for football, B for baseball as well. And we're going to put the 36 here. Along the side of these, I'm going to put a plus and circle it there for an example of an addition bar model, and a minus and circle it because this is an example of a subtraction bar model. Both of them are called part whole since there's one rectangle. This is one where we add because we know the two parts and we're looking for the whole. And this one we subtract because we know the whole and we know one part. So we subtract to find the other part. Okay. Let's do one more comparison bar model down below. Now in this comparison bar model, we're going to do the same one that we did before on the fruit bars. If you did not finish this, pause the video here so that you can do it. Now you should be done. And we're going to take a look at this word problem. It says Grant buys 345 fruit bars. Ken buys 230 more fruit bars than Grant. How many fruit bars does Ken buy? So we know 345 is how many Grant has. And then Ken has this extra amount, 230. And we're looking for how many fruit bars does Ken buy? Okay. Our bar model is going to look pretty much identical to the one that was in the book, but we're going to write it down so that you've got an example of this. All right, so let's write comparison. Since this is an example of a comparison bar model, and feel free to highlight this. So for this one, we know that there are two people. Oh, I almost forgot the answer sentence. Sorry about that. What we're trying to solve for is how many fruit bars Ken buys. So I can put Ken buys blank fruit bars. Okay. So I'm going to give Grant a box and Ken a box. Now, Grant did not buy as many fruit bars. And it might be running out of space because I'm trying to fit it all into one spot here. But if you would like to start a new page, you can do it on the back of the page you're on. Ken bought more fruit bars. Now our numbers here, for Grant, he bought 345 fruit bars. I'm sorry that number is kind of small. Let me see if I can make it a little bigger. That's 345. And Ken's is the amount that we're looking for. And we can solve it because this bracket here is going to make up the difference between how many Grant bought and how many Ken bought. We know that that is 230. Now along the side, when we have a comparison bar model like this and we've got these two parts, basically, they're going to make up this whole, even though it's not a part whole bar model, it looks the same as this. We have two parts and we're trying to find the whole. right? So we're going to add for that one to get to the larger bar here, which is for Ken. So along the side, please show your work, 345 plus 230. 5 plus 0 equals 5, 4 plus 3 equals 7, and 3 plus 2 equals 5. So that is the answer, 575 fruit bars. We're going to write it there, and we write it here. Okay. That's an example of a comparison bar model where we would add. We'll also take a look at a comparison bar model where we subtract at another point. But that's all for now. Sorry, just a moment. I am double checking to see if there was homework. No, you do not have any workbook pages to do. No workbook pages to do. We will discuss this more tomorrow and add to your notes tomorrow. So I look forward to seeing you all and getting back to a normal class routine. I hope that you're all doing well, and I will see you tomorrow at our normal class times, just as usual. Okay, enjoy the rest of your day. No workbook pages again. Bye.